I have devoted my career to preventing mass atrocities, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. For nearly 2 decades, I've worked as an advocate, organizer, and educator, raising awareness and inspiring action on several different crises around the world. I've led advocacy campaigns to respond to crises and advance policy changes to prevent crises from emerging. My inspiration for this work has been in part driven by my Jewish identity, being the grandson of a Holocaust survivor and someone who was brought up with Jewish values of tikkun olam and tzedakah. These imperatives that it's on us to repair our world, fight for justice, and work to establish a more equitable society. When I learned about the genocide in Darfur, Sudan in the early 2000s, I was inspired by many in the Jewish community who are leading the anti-genocide movement, motivated by our own people's history with genocide and persecution and the commitment to never again. Many felt a duty to act. We saw our people's history of persecution reflected in Darfur, and we refused to be silent as so many had been during the Holocaust. The anti-genocide movement was a testament to what we can do when our shared history, morals, and values guide our actions. But for far too long, the Jewish community has had an undeniable blind spot when it comes to Israel and the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Leading Jewish organizations, including some that I was proud to work for, rightly demanded justice and accountability for crimes perpetrated by the crises in Darfur and elsewhere around the world. However, they turned a blind eye to the human rights violations and mass atrocities perpetrated by the Israeli government in Gaza and the West Bank. For years, many organizations defended their silence with excuses like, "We just don't work on that issue," or "It's really complicated." Others have exhibited a disturbing cognitive dissonance, defending, justifying, or even denying the very crimes that they spoke out against in other places around the world. We can't continue to make excuses. Nearly 2 years of Israel's unrelenting assault on Gaza has killed more than 60,000 people, displaced nearly the entire population, damaged or destroyed approximately 92% of all residential buildings, and created a man-made famine. Footage of the annihilation of Gaza is available for all to see, as are the seemingly daily reports of record-high settler violence in the West Bank. At this point, silence and inaction from the Jewish community and the world is complicity. A report this week by The Guardian, the Israeli-Palestinian publication 972 Magazine, and the Hebrew language outlet Local Call obtained an IDF database that revealed that 83% of everyone killed in Gaza so far has been civilians. To anyone with eyes, we could see that the IDF was clearly indiscriminately and disproportionately targeting civilians. But to hear this from an internal database by the IDF is astounding. It should not be surprising at all, though, when you consider that Israeli politicians, military leaders, public figures, and the general public have proudly endorsed genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Recently, more voices in the Jewish community and Israeli society have begun to speak out. While anyone speaking out against these horrors is welcome, some are using language that falls short of accurately describing the current situation. Several posts and statements have framed the situation as a humanitarian crisis, focusing only on the starvation and the need to deliver more aid into Gaza. While there's obviously a serious humanitarian crisis in Gaza, focusing only on the issue of humanitarian aid avoids the truth. The deliberate phrasing avoids attributing the cause of the humanitarian crisis to the widespread and systematic mass atrocities perpetrated by the Israeli government. There's been a lot of debate over whether Israel's actions in Gaza amount to genocide. Initially, many in the Jewish community pushed back against these claims, but recently several prominent academics and Jewish leaders have stated that Israel is committing genocide. While I believe that the correct application of these terms is important, I would argue that the debate about genocide is a distraction. I'm reminded by the words of then Secretary of State Colin Powell in 2004 when he spoke about the crisis in Darfur at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. He said, "These people are in desperate need and we must help them. Call it a civil war, call it ethnic cleansing, call it a genocide, call it none of the above. The reality is the same. There are people in Darfur who desperately need the help of the international community. Call it what you want, the people of Gaza desperately need the help of the international community. And they don't only need aid, they need the atrocities to stop." I, along with several leading experts, academic institutions, international NGOs, and Israeli organizations, have argued that the high legal threshold of intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group has been met, and Israel is in fact committing genocide. But even if Israel weren't committing genocide, it's irrefutable that Israel is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity with shocking impunity. When countries like Russia and Sudan commit similar acts, the US government and several allies impose sanctions on individuals, government entities, and companies. However, When it comes to Israel, not only has there been no sanctions by any major Western governments, but many, especially the United States, have continued to provide arms to Israel, making each government complicit in the ongoing mass atrocities. This is appalling. Regardless of whether it is genocide, war crimes, or crimes against humanity, it's clear that Israel is committing large-scale violations of international law. Israel is committing the same crimes many in the Jewish community have condemned, advocated to end, and campaigned against in places such as Sudan, Myanmar, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so many more. Why should the values that drove the Jewish community to act on behalf of the Sudanese, Burmese, and Congolese not also drive action in support of Palestinians? Israel's leaders and some in the American Jewish community have tried to justify Israel's actions by pointing to the horrific and indefensible massacre on October 7, 2023, and Hamas's continued holding of Israeli hostages. But no act of violence, including mass atrocities, can justify the collective punishment of civilians and the commission of mass atrocities. Perpetrators always try to justify their actions. The architects of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda justified their actions because of the threat of the Rwandan Patriotic Front. The perpetrators in Sudan justified their actions due to the uprising by Sudanese rebel groups in Darfur. The Burmese military justified its genocide against Rohingya due to uprising from ethnic armed groups. I don't recall anyone outside of the perpetrators arguing that the Tutsi, Darfuri, or Rohingya deserved it because armed actors associated with those groups started it. This would be an indefensible position for any other context. So why is it a narrative that people accept when it comes to Israel and Gaza? This is a moment of profound moral reckoning for the world and for the Jewish people. Our commitment to basic human rights, social justice, and repairing the world must be universal. I refuse to accept that this is the way it has to be. I refuse to accept silence and complicity. I refuse to accept that our shared values of tikkun olam and tzedakah stop at the borders of the occupied Palestinian territories. We all must do better.